Hi guys, today we're going to do my May wrap up because that's what booktubers do. Let's begin. May was a decent reading month for me. There were books that were good, but there were several books I had to DNF because they were just god awful. I'm sorry. When I started reviewing books seriously, I said to myself, I'll never DNF books because that just doesn't sound like professional. But that was before I met some of these books, and I'm sorry, they were just horrible and I couldn't take it. So a portion of this video will be a bit of a rant. Let's start. One of the first books that I started reading this month, and it didn't suck, was this book. It's the short stories of H.G. Wells. I bought this because it was very pretty, but I love classics. I write nonfiction for a living, so I can justify my very intense reading habits because it's I say to myself that it's part of work. The more you read, the better you write, obviously. So I do love classics. I haven't finished this yet because I discovered NetGalley this month and I wanted to review upcoming releases. But that being said, this will go into my June TBR, and I've read about 4 stories and I like it so far. It's one of the better reads this month. Another book that I read this month was A Mistress for Penndrake. I did a video review of this. I will link it down below. It's an upcoming release and I got it via NetGalley when I voluntarily agreed to review the book. It was decent. It was one of the decent reads. I gave it 3 stars, and again, I will link the review video down below. It's a romance, historical romance, sort of like a sexier Pride and Prejudice version. I think I gave it a 3.5. Another book that I read this month and DNF'd was this one, Carve the Mark by Veronica Roth. You probably heard of this if you're on Bookstagram or BookTube. I DNF'd this at 50%, which is a lot since this is a thick book, and I will link another review video I did of this. I will not go into it extensively, but I might in the book apocalypse tag. It's a new tag, and which I like, so I'll do that next. Basically, this is set in a world that I don't know because the author apparently also doesn't know what the world is. That's how bad it is. Yeah, I'm done with that book. Another book that I read this month was All the Little Lights by Jamie McGuire, and I like that book. I gave it 4 stars. I will also link the video down below. And the author herself, I don't know her personally or even online. We're not like online friends, but I did like her book. And she retweeted the video that I did of her work, and she called it A Balance. And I was very happy about that. I didn't reply because as a reviewer, I try to stay away from authors, but I was very flattered that she retweeted my review. All the Little Lights is a brief synopsis. It's about a teen boy, an American Indian boy, and a teen white girl in a little town in Oklahoma where the author grew up. And it was written very beautifully. It flowed. Some parts were a bit slow, but it wasn't boring because the plot moved along. And the slower pacing. Generally, I like fast-paced books, but if the book is slowly paced and it was deliberate and beautifully done, it goes well with the story, I don't mind it at all. And I love the characters of All the Little Lights. I thought they were very different, not your stereotypical teen YA romance. So check it out, All the Little Lights by Jamie McGuire. I will add all the necessary links down there. Another book that I read via NetGalley this month and I finished was Fashion Victim. I enjoyed this book. It's about I believe she's a writer. Yeah, she's a writer who works for a fashion magazine in New York. And what set this apart, and I went into this book not expecting anything, except I knew that it was around the world of fashion. And I love the whole serial killer idea of it, and especially how the protagonist is the killer. That's not a spoiler, don't worry. So I thought it was very different, and it will make a great summer read. Now let's move on to the books that I did not finish because they were just not worth my time. The first one is Balt. Now I did a rant about this book already, so I'll link it down below. So just very briefly, there's nothing in this cover that tells you that it's porn, which is what this book is. So no, just a bolt from it. Next is a book from NetGalley as well, which I volunteered to review. It's called Of Your Love. What really bothered me was the editing, not so much the writing. It's a fantasy book with 3 female protagonists, and I could just not get over the fact that the use of the pronouns she and her were just so confusing. I mean, you have these chapters with 3 women, and I had no idea who the narrator was referring to most of the time. But if you like fantasy and kick-ass female protagonists, this book might be for you. I do have to point out that I do write nonfiction for a living, so I have a sharp eye for certain things in terms of the technicalities of the writing. But that being said, it doesn't mean that everything that I read has to be poetic. No, for example, I just finished reading, and this also goes into my May wrap-up, Stephen King's new release, The Outsider. His writing style is extremely simple. I don't have a problem with simple writing style. It goes with the story, it goes with his intent. I enjoyed this book. I have to say I enjoyed the beginning more than the ending, but overall it's a very entertaining read. And somebody pointed out in one of the reading groups I joined that his recent works have been more fast-paced. There's less world building. I mean, the world building is still there, but he jumps into the action a lot more than in previous works where he just goes on and on about world building. So if you want to jump into Stephen King once again and you want a shorter read of his, I suggest this book. So yeah, going back, when I do edit, I get it that people want to be entertained, and I do too when I read fiction. So I don't mind simple writing at all. And it's not like, okay, I read something that sounds ambiguous and it could have been edited better. Okay, I'm done. No, I'm not like that. But if it happens again and again, especially since even though I don't like the story, I will read at least 100 and oftentimes more pages. And if the errors or the editing work is just mediocre, if the writing is just horrible, even after hundreds of pages, then I think it's fair to say that I can DNF the book. Another book that I did not finish this month, and I'm proud to say, is Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This was the first Sarah J. Maas book and the last that I will ever read. I see that she gets a lot of hate on BookTube. That's why I decided to review her book and see if maybe, BookTubers were just being overdramatic. They were not. I just could not get over how nothing was happening in the story. It's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, allegedly. So I'm like, of course, I'm there. I love Beauty and the Beast. You have romance, you have a castle. I love anything gothic. You have a beast, you have the dark element. I mean, you have so much going on. So how can you screw it up? And in this book, I think I went in 100 pages, and after nothing happened, I was like, I could not forgive this because you're a YA fantasy. It should be packed with action, and it was just weak. Another book that I got via NetGalley and that I finished was There Are No Grownups. I enjoyed this book. This book is meant for people in their 40s. I'm not even in my 40s yet, and I enjoyed it. It's about the authors, it's nonfiction, and entertaining nonfiction, and it's about the author's personal experiences, and as well as her research and insights about turning 40s. There are chapters dedicated to anecdotes of hers, such as the time her husband wanted a menage a trois for the first time when he turned 40. And then there are also chapters based on research, such as the concept of middle age, who coined the term, when did it start, when did it become popular, as well as chapters dedicated to the author's insights as with regard to turning 40. So I highly recommend this read. It's light, it's funny, it's a lot more entertaining than some of the fiction works that I read this month. For nonfiction, a book that I started reading, I'm not done with it yet, is Money, Master the Game by Tony Robbins. I've never read any of Tony Robbins' book, but I've seen him online, as you probably have as well. I've seen him on TV. Well, I don't really watch TV, so I guess online. And I also saw his documentary on Netflix, and I was really drawn to his persona and what people say about him. Now, I think it was one of my favorite nonfiction authors, Tim Ferriss, I believe, who said that you should not... he quoted the popular saying, you should never meet your heroes because, you end up disappointed. But with Tony Robbins, a lot of people are saying that he's amazing on stage, and he's an even more amazing person once you get to know him. So lately, investing, saving money has been a priority of mine. So I decided to read more nonfiction books about money and investing. And what Tony did with this book is he has the capacity to interview, since he consults with a lot of the world's most successful people, billionaires, entertainment moguls like Oprah, people of that caliber. So he put together the tips and strategies about investing, about saving money from some of the world's best financial geniuses, I guess you can call them. And so he has some very specific tips in this book. Now, my only gripe about this book is that I don't live in the United States, so a lot of the tips are for people who live in the US and how you can auto-save and all that, and he provides specific tools, so I don't think I can use those. But aside from that, he has some very, very specific tips on investing, saving money, how to allocate your investments, and I don't think these are the kind of pieces of advice that you'll see just anywhere, given Tony's privilege and how he's able to meet these people. And some of them, they don't grant interviews, but he was able to get an interview with them and pick their brains. So I do recommend this book. Another book that I did not finish this month was Her Hollywood Boyfriend. It's an advanced copy, which I voluntarily, again, agreed to read via NetGalley, and it was just so stupid. It's just one of those books written in the 70s, or not even, like the 80s and 90s, where everything is just so cheesy. The introduction of the characters, those teen romance that were very popular and which I admit I read when I was a little girl. But it's 2018, guys. There are better ways to introduce characters, the plot, and all that. And this was just so old-fashioned and dated, and not in a good way, not in a classic way. It's about a teen girl who was dating a guy who became popular, and this is all in the beginning of the story, and she found out that he was cheating on her, so she went to a summer camp, and then romance ensues, but I wasn't around to see how their romance blossomed because the writing was just so dumbed down, and I just could not take it, so DNF. Another book that I read was The Invitation. I think it comes out June or September of this year. I'm not sure. It's actually a very entertaining read. It's about an overweight woman and her life in London and her relationship with people from her hometown, also in England, and the people in her hometown. I like how there's definitely diversity and it's not forced into the story. The protagonist is overweight. She runs a blog about being body positive, so I love that. It's very 2018. It's very fresh. The other characters were also three-dimensional. So if you're looking for a fun summer read that's funny and light and different, I do recommend this book. Another book that I reviewed via NetGalley was The Island Villa. Now, while I like this book and I love the premise, it's about a woman whose husband died. And what she didn't know was that right before he died, he purchased a villa that once belonged to her side of the family in an island in Spain. So I thought that was very exotic. And after her husband died, she found out she's the owner of this villa. And so she goes there and she's grieving and she meets people on the island. And then there are flashbacks to her ancestors from the 1700s who live in the island. And I thought that was extremely exotic, very unique and fun. What I didn't like though was there was a sagging middle. I think it's a perfect example of a sagging middle. You have all these things happening in the beginning, and right in the middle, the motivation wasn't enough, so it didn't really compel me to finish the book, so I had to do some speed reading and fast forward to the end. I prefer the flashback a lot more than the plot line of the main character. But that being said, I think a lot of people will still enjoy this book. It was decently written and professionally edited, and it is a nice summer read as well. It's a new release, so I'll link it down below. I think that wraps up the stuff that I read and did not finish this month. So this was more a did not finish wrap up. I guess that's an oxymoron. But yeah, that's what I read this month, and thank you for watching. More to come soon.